Great Lakes Water Authority Financial Services presents the Knowledge Share series. These operational guidelines provide information to support knowledge and efficiency when completing job tasks. And where applicable, step-by-step instruction of how the procedure is executed is included. Welcome to the Emergency Request Procurement Standard Operating Procedure presentation. The information provided in this presentation is intended for Great Lakes Water Authority personnel with a need to make a procurement relevant to a specific emergency. This knowledge share is provided by the Financial Services Procurement Team. In this presentation, you will be introduced to what an emergency request is. You will be informed of when it is appropriate to make an emergency request. You will also be guided on how to successfully execute an emergency request. We hope this information supports your knowledge to successfully and efficiently complete an emergency procurement request here at Great Lakes Water Authority. As a result of the information you are provided in this presentation, you will be able to recall what an emergency request is, determine when to make an emergency request, identify the appropriate circumstances to make an emergency procurement request, recall the chain of command to get your emergency request approved for submission. The correct perspective is always valuable when learning or providing new information. In the sections that follow, we will put the elements of the emergency request guidelines into context. Having the appropriate context will help you to understand the concept. Putting things into context. To help with context, we'll define what an emergency request is. We'll talk about the steps to take when creating a requisition, who a requester is, and who is involved in the approval process. The Putting Knowledge to Work section is where we solidify the process so you will understand how to execute the procedure and where the forms, tools and resources are located. Then, we'll have a quick recap of the key ideas of the discussion. You will then review next steps, and at the end of the presentation, we will ask for your feedback.
The cold weather, the brakes.
And I could show you how that work is continuing. Look beyond me down on Buchanan. You can see they brought in a front loader and an excavator. They're still clearing the slush and the ice from the street. Once they stop the water flow, they'll dig under the street and get to that 30-foot broken main, that transmission line. Imagine a yardstick is 36
when an
inches.
emergent situation
It's
occurs,
almost that big.
such as a water main break or some other catastrophic event, an emergency request can be initiated via an email sent to the appropriate GLWA authority. These goods or services must be directly related to the emergency. To initiate an emergency request, you will need to complete a requisition. The guidelines state the request must be made within a 24-hour period of the emergency event. An emergency request can be initiated via an email sent to the appropriate GLWA authority. Creating an emergency request. When creating an emergency request, you will need to complete a requisition. You will also need to notify your area chief and ensure you are following the standard operating procedure and the work instructions. So, you will be sure to gain approval of your request. Who is involved in the emergency request process? You might be thinking, who do I contact? Can I just locate the item I need and tell the buyer to get the item from that person or company? When making an emergency request, there are many roles involved with different levels of responsibility. Area chiefs, buyers, chief executive officer, procurement manager, requesters, vendors. Each of these roles has a responsibility in the process. Some may play a dual role, such as the requester and area chief. What is important to remember is, there is a standard workflow and chain of command for submittal and approval. Putting knowledge to work. In this section you will be introduced to all things emergency request and the tools you will need to initiate an emergency request. Here is where you begin, putting what you know to work. That was all great information. Now, let's see if we can put this information together. What form do I use? Where is the form? Will anyone help me to complete the form? What do I do next? The emergency requisition. Let's review the form. I think this will help you to see the information needed here is spelled out clearly. The emergency requisition. Let's take a closer look. Let's look at page 2. This form is easy to complete. It can be completed online. There are 3 pages to this form. The first page is instructions, and as you can see, the second and third page contains the form fields where you enter the requisition information. Let's review some of the key concepts for you to remember. The most important things to remember are the concept of what an emergency request is, when an emergency request is used, how to initiate an emergency request. Other key ideas to remember are: an emergency request is made for goods and/or services that are needed to remedy an emergency event. Always follow the chain of command when initiating an emergency request. Next steps. You have done well. Here are the next steps you will need to take regarding work instructions, processes, or related procedures. Congratulations! You have successfully completed the presentation. Thank you so much for your participation. Your opinion matters. We are expecting you to tell us how we did. Tell us what you liked or didn't like about the knowledge share. That's for our improvement, so we can better serve you in the future. The procurement team also values your input on all things procurement. You may send feedback directly to the Chief Procurement Officer at geowater.org. Click the link to access the training evaluation. All other feedback can be sent to the CFO at geowater.org.